Okay, this is episode 3 of the Fill in the Blank podcast. I've got Michelle on the line with me. Michelle, I am connected with Michelle on Twitter, but she's asked not to use her Twitter handle because she wants to be as anonymous as possible, and we're going to respect that. So you won't see her Twitter handle on the video like you might with others, but you might see her name, Michelle, just so you know who is talking. So, Michelle, uh, thank you for doing this with me. My goal
My
here,
pleasure.
my goal here is to give some of the folks on Twitter a voice. It was actually something like we were just talking about, where people are very, very vocal on Twitter, but then when they're out in public, they're not as vocal because they're afraid that they might say something that offends someone or get into an ugly situation. So, what I'm trying to do with these is just take just regular Twitter users and allow them to uh, have a voice, go back and forth with some questions and some dialogue. And for some people, they want to raise their profile on Twitter, so they would want their handle up there, and I would put it on the video. But in this case, you don't, so that's fine. So, just to get started, why don't you just tell as much as you would like to tell about yourself? Just tell a little bit about yourself, and then we can kind of get into the meat of the discussion.
Okay. I'm part of a military family, so we're pretty patriotic, and we love our country, and um, we love President Trump. And so, yeah, it seems that
Okay.
I'm a mom and a wife, and um, you know, kind of a normal American, I guess. What is a normal American, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Um, so what is it that drove you to Twitter?
Oh,
An activity on Twitter.
well, it's really a good way to get information. I follow the president at first, and then um, it's just nice to dialogue with other people and find out, how other places are doing. You can find out a lot of information really rapidly on Twitter.
Right. You can also get a lot of misinformation as well.
True.
How do you
You have to
handle
be
that? How do you filter through it and figure out what's real and what's not?
Well, first of all, I trust our president, so I follow him and read what he has to say, and that's really kind of my gleaning tool. If he's saying one thing and other people are saying something else, then I go with what he says. You know,
Okay,
I
so
don't think he's going to lie to us.
right. So I support the president, right? I think you know that. You've seen me on
Yes,
Twitter.
yes,
But
definitely.
I've got to ask this question just so we can get into this discussion because a lot of people would say, especially on the left that aren't Trump supporters, he lies a lot. Do you have any
Oh,
thoughts on that?
oh. No, I don't think he lies a lot. I think he trolls them on the left. I think he's like the world's greatest troll,
Mm-hmm.
and it's funny. Um, he can be so funny, really, that you kind of have to get his sense of humor, I think. I mean, I think he's awesome, and I
Right,
don't see him lying. He makes a promise, he delivers. I see other politicians lying a lot,
right, right.
but not him.
So I've got a couple of comments on that. The first is that um, I don't think he lies so much as he exaggerates, or perhaps is more positive and effusive about things. He doesn't seem to think about failure. And I had a conversation with a friend of mine. We're both salespeople, and salespeople, which is what basically he is, every business owner is. You have to be optimistic. You've got to think you're going to make the sale, even though statistically you may only make the sale 50% of the time or 25% of the time. You're optimistic, and I think he's optimistic. The other thing is, I heard this expression, I really liked it, that liberals take him literally but not seriously, and conservatives take him seriously but not literally. And I thought that that was a great way to sum up the differences. I mean, we've got people now, like, how do you feel about him calling the coronavirus the Chinese virus?
Well, I mean, it originated in China,
Right,
so it's just like calling, you know, I mean, French food French, like
right,
it originated in France. And so, like, that's not, I think it's good because I don't think he would have done it, but he's pushing back. The Chinese government, started trying to blame all this on American military, I'm sure. And so, he's protecting our military like he does, and he's pushing back on that
right,
in his way, and that's his way. He's a great troll like that.
right.
He's
And
awesome.
I don't know if you saw today's briefing on the coronavirus, but I saw some tweets from, I think it was someone on the GOP staff that showed a picture of his briefing notes. And he had crossed out in those big markers that he uses, the Sharpies, he'd crossed out coronavirus and written in Chinese virus,
Yeah,
right? So you
that's right.
know that was trolling, right? I mean, he
Yeah,
literally edited it to
right.
put it in
To
there
make sure
intentionally,
that he would say that. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
right?
Because he wants them to know it wasn't the American people, the American service members, the American military that started this. It was started in China. And then the Chinese government, the communist Chinese government that he's been very nice to, by the way, they were the ones that hid it for a long time.
Right.
So, they actually made it worse than it had to have been. It may not have even have gone global if they would have been
Correct.
open up front.
Correct. So I can tell you're really well read and well informed because you probably saw that article that talked about a study that was done, and I can't remember where the study was done, but I know I read the article on Axios, and it talked about the fact that the study projected that there would have been 95% less infections and mortality or deaths if they had gone public with this immediately and shut down travel, because everybody would have shut down travel with China because of that. 95%. And it's on Axios, which isn't exactly a right leaning news organization. And I just found that it's astounding that the mainstream media hasn't been more aggressive and assertive about getting that story out there. It's like they're going to blame America first, just like they did for 8 years with Obama, and it's quite disturbing. Um,
Right. That's what I love about this president too. He doesn't go on an apology tour. You know, we're we don't have to grovel to the rest of the world. I mean, we are not beneath the rest of the world, and we don't have to apologize for the sins of everybody else around the world. You know, so I love that about him.
right, and we don't have
He
to
calls
apologize for
things
success either.
right, but he calls things like they are, and he's well informed and well educated, and just because the mainstream media or whatever is pushing a certain narrative doesn't make it true.
Well, there is a concept in marketing called effective frequency, and when it's used to sell products or services, it's really to get you familiar with a brand or a product. And the more familiar you are with it, the higher the likelihood is that you're going to buy it. And I see the
Correct.
Democrats use that very aggressively. I mean, you and I sit here and go, why? They're just lying to us. We know that that is not true. And they
Correct.
get called on it and they continue to do it. They're not doing
Right.
it for us. They're kind of like figuring out there's 20% of you that are going to be catching us, but there's the other 80%, the people that pop onto Twitter once a day, the people that watch the mainstream media, and they hear a lie 15 or 20 times, and then all of a sudden they're like, well, it's got to be true. I've heard it 15 or 20 times. And I have really watched them ramp up the the use of that very recently, especially with the coronavirus. I think they think the Russia hoax didn't work, impeachment didn't work. This is like God placed this in their hands, and now they've got to make the most of it, because if they didn't have this, they'd have nothing right now going into November.
Yeah, well, they still have nothing because I think that
I agree.
actually most people are more intelligent and they're starting to really get that President Trump is really on, just the average person's side. He's doing things to increase um, our safety, to increase our standard of living, to make it better for all of us. And so I think that more people are getting it. That not to listen. That's why I think there's so many people that follow him on Twitter, really, even because he's the source of what's true. Really.
Right. How do you feel about the election and where Republicans are and where he is in terms of being reelected?
Well, I mean, I think that he's going to be reelected, but I also think that we cannot, just be complacent about anything because, you know, um, I'm concerned about all the dead people voting and, states that have, a certain amount of population, but yet they have more people voting than they have,
Registered.
voting age
Right.
population. So that there's voting fraud going on. I really wish they would get that squared away, like so that there's some sort of a ID for everybody
Right.
to vote, that is eligible to vote. Um, yeah, I mean, I just don't think it's that hard. I have to show an ID to get a prescription med. Why shouldn't I show an ID to vote?
You got to
You
show an
know?
ID to buy an alcohol. I mean, I'm 61 and I still have to show an ID in some places who are just enforcing the ID rule for alcohol. Um,
Wow, that's crazy,
right.
isn't it? I mean,
So I'm
you
out.
know.
I'm out. Having a drink at the bar before we go to our table, having dinner with my girlfriend, and they'll ask for ID, and it's the servers are almost embarrassed, but they do it, and everybody is prepared for it. But yet we
Right.
can't do it for voting because it disenfranchises people. And I haven't seen one person really stand up and say, I've actually seen people of color be offended when they were asked the question about, do you think it disenfranchises you, or it puts you at a disadvantage because you have to have ID to vote? Uh, it, it to me is just, it's kind of like illegal immigration. We all know why the Democrats are so supportive of it. It's because they're
Right.
looking at those people as potential voters,
Right.
whether they have their citizenship or not.
Right. Right. Well, and they just use dead people and everybody else. It's crazy. So that, I mean, I am actually a little bit surprised that hasn't been squared away yet. You
I'd,
know.
I'd agree with you on that. It's kind of astounding to me that we haven't seen a more aggressive approach of bringing, especially in the Senate, something to the floor that we can at least force the Democrats to take a stand on.
Right. And maybe it's because the House is so horrible, and it's the Democrats own the House, and so that could be why. We really can't get. We need to get Republicans, good, solid Republicans in, because otherwise, I mean, the president's agenda needs to be supported, and if he can get people in that vote with him instead of opposing him, then this country's really going to take off.
I agree with that. That's why I'm running, because I don't need to run. I mean, I'm 61. I recently sold my business. I don't need the money. I don't need the power. I got enough. I've got enough things that massage my ego, including a 2-year-old grandson who's the love of my life. And so I
Uh,
don't need this, but I really do think that we have to have people in Congress who are going to help get Trump's agenda uh, pushed forward after he's gone in 2024.
yes, we do.
right?
We
Because
really.
when he's gone, I mean, I think there's the chance. I don't know how you feel about it, but there's a chance we slip right back into that swamp mentality.
Right. Well, I mean, this is the problem, right? Like, so we have some Republican candidates that are running for office. They say they're Republican and that they're conservative, but yet, like, some of them are for, like males and female bathrooms in schools. So they're for the whole transgender thing, which is really a form of child abuse, you know?
Right.
So, I mean, that's outrageous. If you're a Republican and you're for that, then in my opinion, you're not really a Republican. You're a you're a Democrat in disguise, with some Republican ideologies,
Right. Because you're not you're
or
not you're not committed to the ideology. You're committed to the job. You want the job more than you really want to do the job for constituents.
right, right. Well, and maybe, but that's less than 1% of the population that are transgender and transgender children. They, like I could go off on that, but like, you
I
know,
could too.
they get chemically and surgically, transformed into something that they're not, and the suicide rate for people like that is appalling.
Extremely high.
When
Right. And the other thing that I just read about again, I've seen it before, is that I guess that 80% of children who have what someone might look at as a transgender proclivity outgrow it during puberty. So
yeah,
it's
even
just
like my kids, yeah, yes,
right,
like my kids, they have played through their life at all kinds of different things and wanted to be all different kinds of things, like maybe they want to be a car or, whatever. So we don't like, cut off their fingers and attach wheels to them, to go with us.
right.
We don't,
That's a
you know,
great analogy. I've never thought about it that way. That's a great
you know,
analogy. Yeah.
yeah, kids pretend even for longer periods of time, or they get confused because maybe the schools are feeding them something, or, you know, people in their lives or the news or books that they're reading, have agendas, and it can be confusing, especially when you're very young, or whatever. But it's just not, I don't think it's one thing if a 35-year-old wants to do that to themselves. It's another thing when you're 12
Right.
or 8.
And your parents going
Yeah.
to make that decision for you, a decision that literally can change your life or cause the end of your life because of the suicide rate in the transgender community.
Right, and even sometimes I've actually even heard of the parents being opposed to it, but the schools forcing it on the family because they are so liberal. And so they allow the child to go through with this, and the parents are opposed it, but they ultimately like
Children's
lose.
services get involved or whatever.
Yeah, it's
Hmm.
unbelievable. Like some of the problems that is, you know, I think it's just unbelievable. I really do. you know,
So
and
changing,
that's where we're
go,
good people making good laws against that sort of thing.
right.
We do.
Well, you probably know the case in Texas where the divorced couple had a son, I believe, and the mother was trying to allow him to transition chemically and all the rest, and the father didn't want it. And I think it literally went to the Texas Supreme Court. Um, and I don't look at Texas as being a place where, um, it's not California. Let's just put it that way. And
Right.
I was just kind of shocked at how far the mother got in terms of uh, being able to promote that. Uh,
Right. Right.
it's kind of. I mean, it seemed to me it was just like stunningly uh, unbelievable in Texas. So then I
Right.
wonder
Well,
what's happening everywhere else that we don't hear about.
right. And there are pockets, and depending on, during the last administration, a lot of liberal judges got put in place. And so if you're before one of those judges, then, a conservative ideology is going to lose.
So
But
let
that's
me let
why.
me let me ask you a question about that. That's an important topic to me. So when
Mhm.
you see that the Trump administration has either won or lost something in, let's say, a federal appeals court, what's the
Mhm.
first thing that you do?
Oh, me, I just wait for it to go to the Supreme Court, and I thank God every day that one of the first things that he did was he put on conservative judges on the bench, and then in the other courts, to the higher courts,
Right.
because that's gonna. I mean, really, literally, after he did that, then I was like, if he does nothing else, he's done enough. But
Yeah.
he's done so much more. But
Right.
in my
But
mind,
I- but I,
that
but
was
I would agree with that. I mean, the Supreme Court was is absolutely brilliant, but the number of judges that he's appointed and gotten, who was nominated and has gotten approved
mhm, mhm.
across the country is amazing. I mean, I understand that
Yeah,
the Ninth Circuit is now more
conservative.
Republican
It's,
appointees um,
yeah, it's
than
conservative
Democratic.
now. Isn't
Crazy,
that amazing,
right?
right? It's
And that
amazing.
that place, like, I mean, I'll just put it this way: that place was a loony bin. I mean,
Well,
I would listen to some of these hearings that they would hold, and I'd be like, these people did not go to law school. I mean, it was
well,
bad, very bad.
they're totally disregarding it and making up their own agenda and then just saying that's the law. It was really unbelievable. I agree. But the interesting thing is that like a lot of the people in California, you think that they're ultra liberal and they're really not. I mean, we lived in San Diego for a while, military,
Oh, right.
and it's really not that liberal. I remember they were pushing against gay marriage, and the people of California voted against gay marriage, and then it was a very liberal judge that pushed it through anyway.
I remember that.
I mean, that's unbelievable that the judges can go against the will of the people and just push through stuff anyway,
Well, they're
you know?
legislating from the bench, and that's what I think we've got to stop.
Right.
The other thing
Not
we
only,
need to stop is prosecutors who are making up laws to use the legal system to go after political opponents, um,
right,
like with Roger Stone and Paul Manafort. Now, listen, they may have committed other crimes, Manafort taxes or whatever, but I listened to
right.
Sidney Powell talk about our legal system and her representing General Flynn. And
I know.
it's a
He's
Hillsdale
a
College.
hero.
He's absolutely a hero. He's an American patriot. And I'll tell you what, she's just as much of a hero as him because she
Yeah,
is going to go to the mat. She will not. Failure is not
right,
an option. It was pretty clear.
right,
Failure is
right,
not an option.
right,
And she did not have good things to say about the judge. I think it's Emmett. I
right,
forget his last name. I want to say Emmett
right.
Smith, but that's a football player. Yeah.
Right. No, I agree. I agree. They both, and thank God for General Flynn actually and the whole Flynn family. But that's an example of how, that should never have happened ever,
Right.
really.
And
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 that whole family,
and what she said is,
bless them.
yeah, what she said is, but by the grace of God, it's not
Hmm.
you or me, Michelle.
Right.
That
No, I
if
know.
they choose, it could be you or me.
Right. I know. I know.
It's kind of crazy.
And and it has been. There have been other people that are in jail for nothing, really,
Well, she
and they're
says that
serving
it's
very long
yeah.
terms.
She says that it started during Enron. That was decades ago. She said
Right.
it's been going on that long.
Oh my gosh.
It's crazy. So we got about
Well,
I don't want to let
this,
this go too long. We got about 6 more minutes. Can we change topics? Can you talk to me about Joe Biden and what you think about Joe Biden?
oh my gosh, like okay, so first, really, I am just waiting for these whole groups of people to go to jail. I mean, or to at least be tried. I mean, you know, Hillary, Obama, in my mind, they should be tried for treason, and I mean, and then secondly, even if Joe Biden is innocent of all crimes, which I really doubt that, um, to have a person that is obviously like has some sort of infirmity such as Alzheimer's, and I'm not a doctor, I'm not trying to diagnose him, but I mean, he's acting just like my grandmother that had Alzheimer's acted. And
Or my
so it looks
uncle, or my
to
uncle who
me,
passed away from dementia. I
right,
so someone
it
who's been
looks
through it understands and sees the symptoms, and
right.
it's as I'm sure it's as clear to you as it is to me. It's like, listen,
I mean,
he's got cognitive
that looks
impairment.
like yeah, it looks like elder abuse to me. The people that are putting him up there, that abusing him, and that's not okay. Even if he has committed crimes, it's still not okay to abuse him.
Right,
You know,
right.
and so like I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah,
And it
that's disturbing. It's almost. I mean, I feel bad for him, um, just to
right,
watch
even
him.
though I think he's a criminal, I do feel bad for him also too because I don't think that he's in all of his mind anymore. I
Right.
just don't. And so, yeah, I think that that's terrible.
I do
But they're
not
doing it
understand. Yeah, I do not understand why his wife Jill hasn't called a halt to this. I just
right.
don't.
Right.
I
I
mean,
wouldn't do that to my husband.
yeah, and
I
I would
wouldn't do
never
that.
do that to anybody I cared for.
No, no, no. It's not the way you treat somebody, even somebody you don't like.
Right, but
You know.
it's their. I think the Democrats are using him. Um,
Yeah.
so let me ask
Yeah.
you this: who do you think? I mean, he's pretty much cruising to the nomination. Whether or not he makes it to the election is another question.
Right.
But who do you think he'll pick, or the DNC will force him to pick as a running mate?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it could be, Michael or Michelle Obama, depending on your view on that, or it could be Hillary. Oh my gosh. Um, you know, I mean,
He's
I
pretty
don't
much
know.
said it's going to be a woman, right? I mean, he pretty much committed
Right.
to that.
And they say a woman of color. So, I don't know. Maybe maybe one of the squad, wouldn't that be awful?
Oh my
You
God.
know.
Yeah, that I even think for the DNC that would be a non-starter. I mean that.
Right. I think that they're trying to get away from the squad too. So, I don't know. I mean, probably Michelle Obama would probably be, I
What
don't
about
really know.
Kamala?
Yeah, it could be her too, and she actually presents better, but she's awful also, from my opinion.
Right. Have you read any of Peter Schweizer's books?
No.
Profiles in Corruption, Clinton Cash.
Oh, yeah, we do have a movie, Clinton Cash.
Yeah.
We do have,
So
yeah.
so in Profiles in Corruption and what's the other one? Clinton Cash and Secret Empires. But Profiles of
Hmm.
Corruption goes through a lot of people, and Kamala Harris is one of them. Amy Klobuchar is the other.
Mm.
We don't know a lot about their backgrounds, but Peter Schweitzer has gone into it and shown how they've worked the system. I've done some extended tweets, basically doing a cliff notes on the chapters for like Biden, Warren, and Sanders, and I'm going to do the other two because they're interesting. Um, Amy Klobuchar looks like this Minnesota nice person, but she's an incredible. She works the system and
Hmm.
basically votes for contributions. That's basically what the conclusion I drew from reading the book is. And Kamala's
Hmm.
just, she will do anything to get ahead. She's power hungry. She was a ruthless
Hmm.
prosecutor, put a lot of people in jail in California that probably shouldn't have been there. Um,
Right.
she's
Right.
bad. I mean, she's bad. Um, I wouldn't say
Right.
Klobuchar's as bad. She's just power hungry. They're all power hungry. Um,
Right. Right.
so,
Touched with evil too, really.
oh yeah,
I mean,
there's no question. I mean,
yeah.
yeah, they'd just as soon run over someone in a crosswalk as wait for them.
I
So
mean, they vote for if a baby is born to just let them die on a table. Really? I mean, that's evil. You know, that's horrible. You
right,
know, that's the Democratic Party.
I mean, it's crazy. And people say, "Oh, well, that's not what we support." And I've got video of Ralph Northam at an interview on radio, but it's also videoed where he basically explains it. You've probably heard the audio from it. I've got the video too. People say, "Oh, the Democrats don't support that," and I'm like, "Well, here's a video. Here's a video. Here's a video." Like, what? What is it that makes you think that you're going to convince me that I'm not seeing with my own eyes
Well, if they
what they're
wouldn't
saying?
support that, then when that bill was up, to save the babies that were born after an abortion, that would have passed.
Right.
But it didn't pass. And that tells you all you need to know.
Right.
I mean, really, that tells you everything you need to
And we
know.
need to be targeting every one of those people that didn't vote for that. Every one of them.
I know. And why? And why? I have a question too about why there was some Republicans that they weren't there to vote. And I read that they had like plane delays or whatever. But that was an important vote. Like I think that they should have not cut their plane thing. So I would want to know why they were not there.
Right.
Why they
Yeah.
weren't there to make sure that passed.
It's really easy to use a delayed plane as an excuse, right?
Right.
I'd like to see. I'd like to see what flight they were on. I'd like to see the ticket, and I'd like to go back and look at when it left and when it arrived. I'm with you. I mean, and isn't it terrible that we have to think about doing this kind of thing to figure out whether someone in our Congress is telling us the truth?
Yeah, they lie so much that it's just and they have been for decades. I mean, look at Hillary with Benghazi. I mean, it's unbelievable. They just lie. They
Well,
lie.
well, if what Sidney Powell said is true, there are still plenty of things that Hillary could be indicted for, and she she has a lot of hope in Bill Barr. Uh, and I don't think Sidney Powell is. She's no Pollyanna. I mean, she pretty much has seen it and done it all. And
Right.
she's very, very, I would call it optimistic, but I don't mean it in the positive sense. But she's optimistic that there will be indictments. This will happen. People will pay the penalty.
Well, I agree.
She's optimistic about justice, is what I would say.
Right. Right. And I don't think that President Trump would have said all this stuff that he has said to us if he wasn't going for exactly that. I think that he's just making sure that he gets all his ducks in a row and that they actually get prosecuted and put away. Because the last thing that we want is for them to be brought up on charges and then they just get out of it.
Right.
Right. I mean,
and
that would be.
And the other thing that she said, I'll just add this and then we can wrap this up. She said that people were asking, why wasn't Andrew McCabe? Why did they decline? Why was there a declination of indictment on McCabe? And she basically said, first of all, that declination was a very narrow issue, that there are probably other things that he could be indicted for. But then she said, but honestly, I believe that there are bigger fish to be fried than Andrew McCabe. That's the way she put it.
Exactly.
Right?
Right.
That's huge.
And, yes. Yes.
I mean, we're talking above him, Comey, Brennan, Clapper, Obama,
Right.
Loretta Lynn, Sherry. I mean, who knows? But it's got to be above Andrew McCabe's pay grade, and his pay grade was pretty high.
Right. But, we're not looking for the little lieutenant to go down for
Right.
Benghazi.
Right.
That's not what we're hoping for or looking for. It was the people sitting there giving the orders, or the people that are saying, like General Flynn. He tells us about radical Islamic terrorism, right? He tells us about that in his books, which I have read, and like that we've been misled and lied to, and that's been brushed under the rug,
Right.
too. So that gets us in trouble when we vote in people that have an ideology that is rapidly different than our than what our country was founded on. Islam really isn't compatible with a constitutional republic like we
Right.
have.
Right. I mean, it could be if they made some changes, but it doesn't appear that. It appears to me that the folks that would be more liberal Muslims get either overrun, shouted over, or pushed out of the way. You can take that comment any way you want. To keep this Islamic fundamentalist, caliphate driven kind of ideology in place.
Right. Right.
We could
And
do a whole half hour on that.
I don't want you to get me wrong on this. Like, I actually have a friend that is a Muslim, but she's Muslim by birth,
Right.
you know, and, so it's not that I'm prejudiced or anything, it's just that when you have an ideology that is telling you that then you have to listen to what they're saying, and when they're saying that they want to kill you and throw gays off roofs, then, I think that you need to listen and go, well, maybe that isn't really compatible with our society,
Agree.
you know.
So, Michelle, we're at 36 minutes, a little longer. I
Oh,
really, really, really appreciate you doing this with me.
yeah, you can
And
probably use my Twitter handle. I don't care. It's Rocky Mountain Links. So,
okay,
yeah,
I'll put that
that
up. All right.
if you wanted to or not, it's up to you.
Yeah,
Either
no,
way.
I'll gladly do it. It's really up to you. I mean, I want to respect your wishes. So, I'd gladly put it up there,
Well,
though.
I
You'll
mean,
probably get a lot more followers from this call because I
oh my
think there's some
God.
really, really good stuff in here.
Well, I mean, I'm not doing any of this to, get followers or not get followers. It's just really my, opinion and about our country, which we love a lot. My husband and I both love our country a lot. So
As do
we're
I.
happy for people like you that are running, and you'll be a really great, represent. You'll be really great, to help the president's agenda. I'm grateful for
Thank
people
you.
like you.
I will tell you, though, that I've already learned, and I've got a pretty thick skin, so it's no big deal, but the amount of threats and vulgarity I've already experienced, and I'm a nobody. Okay, I'm a
Yeah,
nobody. Is
yeah.
amazing. I'm saving them.
Oh
Tweets,
no,
emails, voicemails, even crazy,
really?
crazy. Yeah,
That
but I'm not.
that isn't
I'm not
okay.
concerned. I'm not concerned at all. Trust me, I'm not concerned.
That's terrible that people do that. Isn't that terrible?
It really is
And
terrible. Yeah, it really is terrible.
yeah.
But it is the way it is. So, Michelle, thank you very much. I very, very much appreciate this, taking you away from your family for 40 minutes or so. But maybe that was good if you're quarantined. Uh,
Yeah, our
it's
quarantine.
kind of nuts, but I never thought I'd be going through this. But anyway,
No, it's so unprecedented. It's so weird, isn't it?
it
It's
really is.
so,
It really is.
yeah. Well, stay safe out there,
Thank
and
you. You as well. Stay healthy, stay safe,
all
and
right.
thank you very much.
You're
Okay.
welcome.
All right.
Have a nice evening.
Thank you. You
Bye.
too. Bye bye.